All right, guys, welcome to section B of chapter 7. I'm going to keep talking about these funky landforms, okay? So remember that Earth's crust is broken up into these tectonic plates, and the tectonics, the movement of those plates, causes things like earthquakes, but it can also form mountains. So tectonic mountains are those that are formed by those tectonic forces or that tectonic movement, okay? Mostly they're formed at convergent boundaries, and that should make sense. If you think of things coming together, they're going to kind of push up like that. And so it makes sense that a lot of mountains are formed that way. But they can also be formed at divergent boundaries, which is what the mid-ocean ridge is. It's a huge mountain range, but it's actually at a divergent plate boundary. So mountains can form at both of those, okay? So let's talk about the convergent ones first, convergent landforms. First of all, sediment, and I showed you that sedimentation tube in class. Remember, sediment is the eroded material, the gravel, the rocks, the sand, the silt, the clay, all the stuff that erodes away somewhere, but it eventually lands somewhere else, okay? So when sediment settles, it settles horizontally. It settles flat, okay? But this movement sometimes causes it to look weird, okay? So it says some strata, remember those layers of rocks, are folded without breaking, okay? So we can see in that picture there that the strata is bent, okay? And it goes kind of follows that little curvy pattern. It's not really broken, okay? We don't see a separation there. It's not a fault. Which tells us that had to happen while it was pliable. It had to have been soft enough, which is evidence for it happening during the Great Flood. Okay? This happens enough that we get these mountains called fold mountains, and those are just mountains that are formed from folded rock strata. And if you look in your book, you can see a picture of some of those on page 161, I think. This is just a smaller example of that, okay? So we get these areas that can be labeled an anticline or a syncline based on the direction of the fold, okay? So the upward fold of the mountain, the upward part, boom, is called the anticline, and the downward fold, like right there, would be called the syncline. It's just the definitions, okay? Occasionally we get this thing known as a monocline, and I don't have a picture of that. It's just a single fold, and it kind of forms a single like step in the strata. And that's just called a monocline, mono for one, okay? All right, but then we get some landforms at the divergent boundaries as well, okay? The most common is called a rift or a rift valley. And a rift is a steep-walled valley lined with high cliffs. This is kind of a small picture of a rift, but a rift valley could be very wide, very vast. And it's low-lying land, because this has happened for over a long time, and then higher elevation on the sides, like cliffs, okay? This is actually taking place in Eastern Africa, and you can see this giant crack in the ground. And you can walk up to it, a person would be like standing right there, kind of for some size perspective. But you can, like I said, you can get much, much wider rifts like this. So the low part on the inside of the rift is called a graben. It's just the lowest level there. As this spreads out, a lot of sediment can kind of fill it in, and you can get like a valley on the inside of that. Low part would be called the graben. Another kind of example of a landform that we can see from this is known as a fault block mountain, okay? What fault block mountains are is they are formed when there's multiple normal faults in a row. If you remember, a normal fault is when you've got tension pulling the fault apart, and the hanging wall, remember the hanging wall is the top part, the hanging wall slips down. So if you have several of those, you've got some of this downward slip, and then what's left sticking up becomes a mountain, okay? So you might get a range of mountains formed in that manner. Eastern Africa has a large rift valley, like I talked about. Scientists predict that eventually the entire eastern portion of Africa is going to kind of be its own island almost, because as the divergent boundary is separating, the land is getting lower, and eventually the water from the coast up at the top and the coast down at the side will be able to come in and fill that low area. That'll take a long time though, but I think I have a video to show you guys that. All right, then we get these other kind of funky landforms from this upward movement of the tectonic plates, okay? Plateaus are actually formed with this. Plateaus are fairly stable, level layers of sediment, relatively undisturbed, okay? But at some point, the tectonic forces cause them to kind of rise up at a level area. This is known as Horseshoe Bend. This is actually the Colorado River running through here. I got to go there this summer. I actually took this picture, and you can see this flat area. This is flat on here. This is a plateau. The river just happens to run through the plateau, okay? And you can see that this is very level layers of strata here, mostly undisturbed, okay? We also get these things called domes and basins, okay? So sometimes the strata is pushed up by magma underneath it, okay? And it forms a dome. Sometimes the opposite is true. When the magma empties out, the strata might sink down, and that causes a basin, okay? Both of those are just examples of the uplift type of landform, all right? Good pictures in your book. Make sure you follow along and check those out, okay? That's all I've got for you guys. Bye-bye.